There we are.
Hey.
Showing up.
We were doing so well for time as well.
Hello. You've joined me with some yellow things. Today is mostly a painting of yellow. It happens to be in the context of a daffodil and some lemons. But I'm not really going to think about those things too much. I'm going to think about the yellows and trust the rest of it to take care of itself. I've got two panels here, but I'm going to paint it like one picture, sort of. And yeah, we'll see how they, if they can share a palette and produce an interesting painting. So we were just discussing.
Yeah, it's worth going over what we were chatting about beforehand, isn't it?
Starting colour. So I'll usually do a little bit of drawing at the beginning, and I'll usually use I will always use a fairly transparent colour so that there's hardly any pigment going on, and this will give me a, what do you call it, a very, very thin layer with hardly any paint there. So when I work over it, especially when the thinners have evaporated, there's almost nothing to mix in with the subsequent layer of paint. So I can get some tonal values on quite quickly. I want a colour, a paint that I can go quite dark with, so I can get a tonal range. Sometimes I'll chuck a few lights in just as a placekeeper. Is that the word I was looking for?
Placeholder.
Placeholder. Yeah.
Brilliant. My work here is done.
Yeah, thank you, Graham.
Good night.
So to begin with, I've got an idea of this daffodil, and the shadows make one shape and the daffodil sits over the other. So there's this kind of diagonal, quite a steep diagonal going across. Even if I just go from the shadows, I've got this sort of direction.
I think you've also got to explain as well why you have two
it means it makes two paintings.
well, yeah, but don't you need to? Isn't it worth talking about that as well?
Well, I've got these small canvas sizes which I quite like. They're panels, and I've got some little frames for them. And yeah, if I were to paint these together, it would make a much bigger picture. It'd probably be a bit more involved. So a big part of these decisions, it's sort of about making, having a cheap range, really. You know, making stuff that's affordable rather than, you know, just paintings which inevitably end up being quite expensive. Maybe not.
Like the fact as well. The way that you looked at me, I said maybe you should explain that there's two panels on your page, and you just looked at me as though it's like the most normal thing in the world for a painter. Of course I've got two panels. Well, why wouldn't I?
Yeah. So, well, it's not that normal for a painter, I guess.
I love the idea. I think it's brilliant.
So I'm straight away finding out some interesting things about the scale of this. It's going to be quite small.
Oh, evening, Josie.
Oh, hi, Josie.
Amazing. Without fail. There we go. Saying it's springtime then.
Yes,
it certainly is.
So I've got a bit of a spring theme. Now I'm going to connect this with the shadow which sticks out from it. I'm prepared to accept that it might grow a little bit as it goes along. I'm not going to get too caught up in the drawing, if I can help it.
Is there a reason that you decided yellow this evening?
Yes. Yeah, so I'm collaborating with an artist friend who's doing a little open studio. I'm not going to put the details out on here because of all the weirdos. But yeah. No, it's not my show, so it's not my place to do that. But yeah, and they've been making very excellent sculptor who's also sort of making an affordable range, if you like, you know, call it that. And they've got a shelf, and they're going to have some yellow things. And a lot of what joins our work together is a sort of an approach to colour. So I'm going to put some of these shadows in here and see how they kind of stick out. And so really, yeah, it's just so there's a sort of a colour conversation going on. I think I might have to, that's already too high. I mean, I could change the length of the stalk without necessarily cutting it. I'm already unhappy about that. All of it. I might just do some big shapes. A little scoop, and a little scoop, and a little scoop. I'm going from the bottom up, which means I'm always going to end up extending too far. And that's going to be where my daffodil goes. And that's the top of the daffodil up there, already soft. I'll start with the daffodil instead.
Top down.
Yeah. Let's have it here and here and there. That's going to be at the top of my daffodil. That'll be fine. Got this shape, this shape. It's going to be very small. I'm going to keep it mini. Sort of thinking of the shapes around the outside. Yeah. Does that work? Something like that. That's roughly where my daffodil's going. I've only got one colour here, so it's quite hard to distinguish the shadows that are in the daffodil from the shadows that are outside it. I've got some idea. Now that's in, that shape's going to go down there. Yeah, there's no way I'm getting the pot in as well. It's not going to go. Now, what's that level with? So should I shrink the whole thing? So now I've got that, I can start to put some of these shapes in and see if this works, if it works with the pot going off the bottom. So I've got an image now already. I can work some of that back. Edge of the pot lines up with that petal there, so that's going to go in here. So maybe it is shrinking a little bit. Maybe that is around the bottom of it. I don't know. So yeah, so I'm finding myself finding my way to some fairly clumsy drawing. That outside lines up with this. It's going to go all the way out. So yeah, it's growing and shrinking, and I'm just playing around with the shapes at the moment. Now the question is this shadow at the bottom. Does that work? If I scrub all this in, I'll soften it all down now, take some of the tone out of it.
Very interesting this evening where your camera's set up at the same line as your hand. The focus goes onto your hand and then back onto the painting when you move away.
Oh, that's not helpful, is it? Okay, I'm going to try and get a little bit more dark on here. Yeah, I need a taller canvas for this. I mean, I'm partly tempted to just get a taller canvas, but no, I quite like it. It's sort of like a launch pad. Again, like I said, I'm going to make it all about the daffodil. But while I'm doing my drawing, I can go across. Now the lemons are interesting because there's this lemon at the back, and that's going to be around here. And I'm just going to build the rest of the image around it. And I'm going to start with shadow shapes, and that's got like a shadow shape that goes there. And then there's a related shadow shape which is going to be sort of over here somewhere, like that. And I'm lining these shadows up slightly, so it's going to be like that. And there's a sort of a gap, and then there's the edge of the plate, so the shadow that goes under there. So it's quite fun. And then just using up the last of it. There's sort of a shape here that juts out and it meets up with the edge of that. And then further up, this bit under here. So that could be quite interesting. Straight away I'm going to add more brown here, so I've got a bit of distinction. And go even a little bit darker, see if I can get away with it. Again, this is dangerous because it's getting into the realms of, yeah, more paint. That's probably a little bit too much. Tiny little dip of thinners. That's way too much. Dry that off a bit.
Catherine's Machin says, "Happy Monday, James. Hope you're well."
Oh, well. Very happy Monday to you too.
Okay.
Thanks for coming along. So yeah, a few more little shapes here. There's going to be a little bit of shadow sticking out of that. Yeah, I don't need to fiddle around with this much more. That's going to be level right underneath here, so I guess we'll round that off in some way. And it'll sort of taper here, so that's quite nice to get that little taper in.
So are you doing these as two separate paintings, but obviously they're sort of next to each other? Because
I'm going to be using the same colours on both. So just like on a normal painting, I'd have a colour on the brush and I'd be looking for the places where it goes. Similarly with this, I will be doing that, but I'll be jumping from one to the other. At least that's the plan. It might not work, which should be entertaining in itself.
Yeah.
You know? I know people are often rooting for me to fail, and I'd hate to disappoint them. So yeah, sorry about the focusing thing when my hand's lingering. Yeah, there's already a little bit of a difference going on. I'm going to pop a bit more blue in here, just for the sake of scrubbing in some shapes around here. So I've got a little bit of drawing that I want to put in. That's level at the side about here. So I can scrub in some shapes now. That's thinning out nicely. A little bit there. A little bit here. Where's this going to go? There's that shadow, there's that shadow, there's that. That's going to be roughly the edge of the plate. I'm rushing through the drawing a little bit, but hopefully you can see that now. Ta-da! When I get that blue on, I might do a few of these other edges as well, just little bits, just to get the drawing in. That's going to
Catherine says lots of bright yellows in here. Are you using Hansa or CAD yellows?
Oh, so I've got my CAD yellow. I'm going to start off using a bit of yellow ochre just to keep the chroma down, and then I'm going to sort of build up the brighter yellows just where I need them, so I can keep that sort of that change, that conversation, if you like, between the intense yellows and the duller yellows. Although I'll end up making a few sort of funny bits and pieces, I'm sure. That's going to interrupt into that.
Can I ask, what is Hansa and CAD yellows? Are they different pigments?
Yes.
I'm learning.
Yeah. There's lots of interesting yellows. I don't know much about Hansa yellows other than the name, so I'm sure
Okay.
we could probably get some help on that one.
Yeah.
I know I could do with it, so do.
Catherine, please, write in and give us a bit more information on the Hansa.
I'd be interested to know what you favour with yellow, because yellow it's a tricky colour in the sense that yellow is really characterised by its brightness in a way that other colours aren't. Light blue, dark blue, they're all blues. We create this little category in our minds and we go, well, that's blue. But yellow, when it's dark yellow, we call it green or brown. Its yellowness sort of goes away. So the way we characterise it with our mind. So getting paint to describe that relationship between our eye and colour is especially tricky with yellows and oranges. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So this is an interesting thing. Now, I said about making a few little placeholder marks. I've got this cadmium yellow here. I've got this warm bit on the inside. I might just take a tiny little dab, tiniest dab, but this is as yellow as I can go. And the yellowest, there's a bit of this petal here. If I'm confident enough about where the drawing goes, I could put a blob in. Now all my other yellows have got to relate to that, but look at that on the screen now.
Wow.
It's yelling at you. There isn't any part of the lemons that get quite that yellow. The yellowest part of the lemons is a bit paler. I've got some lemon yellow here, very old lemon yellow. I'm going to keep what's on the brush because I want it somewhere in between.
So Catherine just said Hansa is similar to CAD yellow without the toxicity.
Yeah. In terms of hue,
it usually has a higher tint strength than CAD, but it is a little more transparent.
Yeah. And that's the other thing. You've got
and that also makes it a very bright yellow.
There's two of us explaining things to you now. How does it feel?
Great. That's amazing.
Yeah. So the other thing with yellows, you get aureolin yellow. I don't know if it's the same thing. And again, it's quite bright, but it is very transparent. And so transparency is that's not even the brightest it's going to be, but I think that's as yellow as this bit's going to get. So I've got those as a little placeholder. Now I'll work my way up towards those colours, but they'll give me a sort of a context. Similar kind of thing if you've got a broad tonal range, which I suppose I have here. Having a bit of white doesn't hurt. You know, what's the brightest bit? Are you going to go as far as a bright white? If yes, then don't be afraid to put a little bit in, I always say. Because when you're mixing those subtle greys, if you can't see that jump to the bright white, you can overshoot. And then when it comes to doing the little bright highlights, they don't do anything because they haven't got the context.
Okay.
I'm going to take a tiny little bit of grey.
So is CAD short for something?
Cadmium.
Right.
Which is a heavy metal. And is quite poisonous in some forms, but like all chemicals, it depends on whether it's a form that you can ingest or not. And in paints, you're okay. Unless you sort of smear it on yourself like a skin lotion, you'd have a real job poisoning yourself with it. But some poisons are cumulative in that your body doesn't have a way of getting rid of them. So Fiberglass is a good example of that. And also some things like, there's a saying with turpentine that if you're not allergic to turpentine, you will be. Because there's a point where you can't tolerate any more exposure. There's nowhere for it to go. Your body can't process it. Some things your body does process. So, as long as you have time to process them, they'll go away, and then you can poison yourself again, kind of thing. But with paints, you do have to be very careful. You really have to treat all of them like there's a sort of accumulative toxicity. Did I say that right?
I've never been able to say that word right. System of a Down did a song called Tox. And I can never do it. I can never say the name.
Go on, have a go though.
Toxicity.
Oh, you got there in the end. Yeah.
Oh,
try and do it without the pause in the middle. That makes you sound like an idiot.
No.
I'm so mean to Graham.
As Catherine's also said, for people who paint outside, Hansa is physically a lot lighter than cadmium. So for people who need to lug their kit about, it's helpful.
See, I've never considered the weight of a tube of paint except for with lead white, and that's just because it's fascinating how much heavier it is. But that's interesting. Yeah, see, I overload myself so much. I'm like in... What would you call it? Yeah, I'm in sort of exercise mode every time I try and take the easel out, because I'm no good at controlling that stuff. So I just accept I'm going to be lugging some giant weight up a hill, wishing I'd been more careful. But I mean, I take all my normal paints, which includes big tubes, and I'm only going to use one squirt of it, but I carry the whole thing. And once you put them all together, it is quite a lot. But also a sturdy box that doesn't fall over is going to be heavy. It's the weight that keeps it stable. So these are all interesting things to discuss. Now, I'm wondering if I do a background colour first, that'll give me a context. I was saying beforehand, I want to keep it really neutral. It'd be tempting to go way too grey with this. So I'm going to mix, way too blue. So I'm going to mix a grey first. I'm going to try and see the tonal jump from my white. That's not enough. It's going to be darker than that. This is a previously mixed black, which was raw umber and ultramarine, so it's probably slightly on the blue side already, but pretty neutral. Actually, it's maybe more on the brown side now. Little bit darker than that, just a little bit. So I'm doing some fine-tuning, tonal fine-tuning right from the off. So that should make me comfortable and relaxed when doing the next bit, because I know it's all in hand. There's that. That's pretty good. I'm pretty comfortable with that. I'm going to take that grey and I'm going to mix a blue. The first thing I'm going to be thinking of is the hue, which is going to be slightly greeny. I'm going to need a bit of white in that just to see what colour it is, which is not a problem because it's not going very dark.
Josie said, why so light on that plate, which looks pale coffee coloured?
Oh, they're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks pale because partly the camera adjusts, but it's going to be white. If you look at the actual image itself, there's a few white bits. They'll probably get a bit pinker, or they'll probably have a little bit of an extra hue to them, these whites around the plate here. There's a few bits where it gets really bright, and balancing the yellows and the tones is going to be a bit of a job. So that's just a placeholder. It's very thin paint, but it's enough to make me see how light it can go. Thicker white paint will make that a bit brighter, so I've still got a little edge I can put in on it. This blue is way too blue. I'm going to lower the chroma a bit by putting some raw umber in it, which should also yellow it ever so slightly. It's also darkening it. So I'll go with that. And now I just need to match the tone to the grey I mixed. At the moment you can see it's much darker. And if I match the tones, then I can mix them with impunity, shifting it towards the blue or towards the grey without worrying about that's pretty good. I don't know if you can see those together. Yeah, so this is much too strong a blue, but if I take some of that grey, and I can always mix more as long as I keep a bit on the palette, I'm just letting the blue that's on the knife mix with it. I'm seeing it start to shift and get a bit more in there then. And now I've got this lovely neutral blue. That's probably a bit too blue now. I'm going to have to mix more grey. Let's do that again over here. Now I've run out of black, so if this isn't dark enough, which it isn't, I have to mix a bit more of that. Wakey wakey. More black, pop it in here. Get it towards about the same tone. Darker.
It's really interesting looking at what you've done on the lemon side from here, because it genuinely looks as though somebody's shone a light just on that one section of the of what you're painting.
Yeah, yeah.
Really interesting.
And that's where I want your eye to go as well. That's going to be a part of it. I'm going to
so everything else from that point outwards be slightly duller in its colour?
Yeah, feasibly. Okay, I've got this blue now. I'm going to use a little bit of oil, and I'm going to start to just pop it in as a fairly thin layer. I'm not even using a big brush here. Then I can start to put some of these shapes in, and once they're in, I'll have a pretty good idea of these sorts of the relationships I'm looking for. I think that does quite a nice job of introducing quite a lot of blue, and you can see how grey it is compared to this one. In fact, I think we have a palette cam option, don't we?
We might do. Well, let me know when you want to go to it.
Yeah, let's do it.
No, not that one. That one.
There we go. So you can see how intense that blue is. And this is the blue I'm actually using. And it's really greyed off. Even this one's noticeably bluer than this. But it works really well. And you go back to the canvas again, and you can see how incredibly blue it looks. So again, I'm scrubbing that in. It's quite thin, so I've got the option to sort of add more pigment to it, shift it, one way or another. Certainly in the foreground here, I'll probably add a bit more of a sort of yellowy light into that. But for the moment, as a placeholder, that will work. And as I said before, it will also work in the background of my daffodil. So I'm not using up an awful lot of it. Yeah, I have shrunk the stalk a bit here, but that's okay. And this should give me a sort of a context for the colours that follow. It might even be useful as a colour to darken the yellow into a sort of a dull green for some of the shadows. That's the stalk, and that's going to go there. It's actually going to come
The
across.
contrast between the yellow and the blue there is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, It's a big departure. Where else am I going with this? I'm sort of wandering around, tucking in there. Actually, that petal's a bit smaller. Maybe that comes up a little bit. There. So it's going to keep focusing on my hand here while I do this in. So I sort of work around the camera. But yeah, this is on panel, so the brush marks are still quite visible, even though I'm using the paint very thinly. Before yeah, you know what? That's going to come across. It's going to move everything a little bit. This is going to get bluer as it goes into the foreground, or darker at least. But this will do for the moment.
Actually, the way the camera's set up, people are seeing the fact that you're wearing gloves. You're being a good boy.
Yeah. Yeah, so this little clay pot is one I made myself when I had a cheap electric wheel in the house, which at one point went bang, and then I had the kind of charred wreckage of a of a potter's wheel. Yeah, so that wasn't good.
If I was a man that enjoyed a dad joke, I would probably say something along the lines of, "Is there nothing you can't turn your hand to?" Oh, it's good, it's good. These just come into my head.
Is it good though? Really though, is it? Okay. Yeah, it gives me a rough idea of where things go. I'm going to soften some of the edges where I'm not sure of what's going on, which is most of it. So I can restore those edges and shapes later. I'm starting to see some interesting things. So that's the palette working across, and the two, although I've separated them into two images, they are talking to each other quite nicely. I've stuck them together so you can see both of them in the image here. Yes. Right, I'm going to keep that brush for later blueness. And another big brush. I'm not going to get fiddly too soon. I want some of these yellows, so I might have a little bit of just a little mixing party, just so I can see some of the flavours of yellow on the palette. So should we go back to the palette cam?
Palette cam coming up.
And I don't know if the source material's there. You can have a little fiddle around with that window on the left.
Which this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. One moment, please.
While I have a crack at this. So I'll start off with the brightest yellow, which is going to go right next to the yellow out of the tube, and then I'm going to pop a bit here. Okay, this is going to go into two families. It's going to go into a blue family over here, and I'll borrow a bit of, even if I just use a bit of grey, we'll see what happens to that. It's gone quite green, but that's okay. So it's only a little bit darker. I could have gone way too far with this if I hadn't been more careful. So I'm going to need one in between those two. So I'm going to move this along. Let's take that bit. Let's take some of that yellow and put it here. Yeah, there's a slightly more subtle greeny version. And I'm going to make a warm version. Now, funnily enough, a lot of these colours are actually going to be a mixture between the two. So the warmer version, I'll start off. Oh, I was going to. Yeah, okay. I'm using this yellow so I can really see what happens, and then I might do the same thing with the yellow ochre. I'm going to use a little bit of raw umber and a little bit of cadmium. Oh no, sorry, alizarin, because it doesn't get that warm. There we are. Put those together. Mix this up. Okay, that kind of goes with this. This one kind of goes with this. So we've got these two temperatures going along, warm and a cool, but both into sort of the darker versions. And then somewhere in between the two, we're going to have a really sort of browny version. So I'll let that go green, and then I'll put alizarin in it. This is obviously way too dark. None of it gets quite that dark. Some of it gets a bit darker than the blue. So yeah, I'll put a bit more yellow in it first. Try and put it back that way. Again, it's going to go
I
on.
like the way how the palette has gone from like extremely bright at the top, and it just keeps going less and less and less as you're working your way down.
That's too much darker than the blue, but only just. And at that point, actually, I don't think I need to worry about the warm and cool as much. I think it's all going to be a bit warmer when it gets to that. I'll pop a tiny little bit more red in there. It's really a bit browny. And let's lighten it slightly, and I'm using white rather than more yellow because I don't want the chroma to change. That's pretty good. And tonally, you can see how much darker it is than the blue, which is, yeah, only a little bit. So that's okay. I'm quite happy with that. Let's try this again. Let's make an actual green with this yellow ochre over here and some of this blue. That's still mostly blue. Quite like it though. I'll keep that one side. A bit more yellow ochre over here. No, I'm getting carried away adding blue to it. It's too much. Okay, it's a duller, more dull colour. Oh, that's going to work for the inside. So I've got the trumpet part, and it's got some slightly different colours in it. And that is going to work a treat, because the yellow ochre carries quite a bit of warmth with it. So it's a cooler version. Let's have a bit of that. And a bit of red, so I'm making a warmer version this side. There. So I've got these little families. That's almost no paint. I don't know how much of it I'm really going to need. Probably a bit more than that. Use up the rest of the yellow ochre. A little bit of red in it. There we go. There's a nice warm yellow that side. So there's these interesting families of yellows. This is probably already too many. You know, I haven't got any feedback at the moment as to what's going to work and what isn't. But I suppose it's a good way of thinking out loud about. There we go. There's a slightly warmer yellow there. High chroma.
That was amazing. Just the tiniest amount of
Oh,
red
yeah.
in that,
Yeah.
and it just immediately went from being quite a cold colour to just, oh wow.
Yeah, and the thing is, the tinting strengths are, it's just how sensitive we are to that kind of change. Whereas, you know, if I did the same thing with a blue and a green, the same thing would happen, the same journey would happen from one hue to another, but it would be far less obvious. So yeah, I'm also going to want a slightly washed out one, so I'm going to do a paler yellow over here. Which is going to work better for the lemon. So that's almost like my bright lemon colour now. And then I'll do a slightly warmer version of that. I'll borrow a little bit of this. And it's drifting off the yellow pretty quickly. Pop a bit more in. Yeah. That's some pretty good colours. Now I've got these, actually, that should be enough for me to start. I'm going to have to remix some. I don't want to mix so many, I can't remember how I did them. So should we go back to the painting?
Absolutely. Where we go? On there. Ta-da!
Now I'm going to start with...
Oh, the beautiful fade as well, I might just add. Very nice.
Thanks.
Very nice.
Thanks. I set all that up ages ago, can't remember how I did it. I'm going to go for some of these muted orangey colours. There's some in here. Again, I'm realising I could do some darker ones now, but that's all right. There's some in here. And again, sort of all around the trumpet bits. So this is where I'm getting a bit more, what we were talking about earlier, I'm getting a bit more paint on the surface now, which means this is going to mix with subsequent layers. So if I decide to sort of shift it here or there later, it's going to show up. And it looks quite a strong colour, but actually it's going to, you know, if you look at it compared to the blue, it's about the same tone, which is quite dark, at least from the flower's point of view. I could do a few darker colours. Let's pop a little bit into here. And where else? A little bit into here. Just a little smear of it. Where else is it? A little bit in here. Pop a bit in that. Can't hurt. A little bit here. I'm seeing some warmth there. Some warmth here. A little bit in the outside there. So this is going to mix and come through with what I put on subsequently. There's some warmth in that bit. I've gone too far with that, but that's all right. I can bring it back. And oh, a little bit at the back of this, just a bit here. Anything at the front? Yes, and at the front. Just in this shadow here. Now that's next to the white, you can see how dark it really is. As I go along, this paint's going to have to get a bit thicker too. So without changing the brush, I'm just going to wipe off the excess. I'm going to move across to this sort of paler greener version. And let's pop a bit of that in here. Let's have a bit in there. It changes. Where else is it? A bit in there. I think that might need to move. Or is that okay? Oh no, that will need to move across. Okay, where else? A little bit here. Need to worry about the edges too much. Maybe some there. Yeah, it's this sort of change of temperature as it goes. Right, back to my, yeah. Back to me daff. So I don't know if that'd be too much, and I'm going to have to scrape some away when it comes to putting the the brighter colours on. But hopefully they'll kind of survive it. I'll go back to that warm one. Oh, I already put a bit in there, so that was okay. There's also a bit there. I'm fiddling too much now. Back to the cool one. Yeah, a little bit down here. What about this side? Yeah, a little bit on there. Yeah, nothing. I can put these backgrounds back in, so I can be a bit more bold about this. It's still on the warmer side compared to the very cool one, which is coming next. So maybe that'll be okay.
Do you always start with the warmer shades and then?
No, there's no particular rule to it. I'm thinking more about colour intensity. So if I go across to this green one now, see that looks paler now, but it works for here. Once the lights go on again, because I've lost that bright highlight now, so I've lost that context. I'm going to put a bit of cool on there, a little bit up here, keeping it really subtle. Pop a bit on the bottom of that stalk. That can come later. How much cooler does it go here? A little bit in the middle. Where else? A little bit in there. So this is current temperature change as it moves around. Definitely a bit in there, but it's not getting darker. So I'm thinking cooler and I'm expecting darker, and that's not happening. So that's the thing I need to react to as it goes along. How are we doing for time?
We are at 7:48.
Okay, this is good though. Going okay. Right. Just going back to that warm one more time. I'm still using a big brush. I'm still being a bit clumsy about it. Actually, all right, I'm going to go across to here. I'm going to make a slightly warmer version of this darker. What was a more saturated colour, but it isn't now. I put a few little dabs of that in where it's necessary. Ooh. Still very subtle. Still not committing to any particular finished, what would you call it? Structure or what have you. Definitely here. That's going to have to go a bit darker here. But again, I don't have that white to see the comparison, so might have to figure that out later.
Just going back to the comment about the painting outside and physically taking paints with you. Is paint measured in weight or is it measured in volume?
It's measured in volume. So yes, so you'd get it in standard size tubes that go from, well, very, very small up to usually around 200 to 250 millilitres, at which point you'd start to get it in a tub, or a tin.
And I mean, the difference in weight between I mean, the two that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a massive
Yeah,
difference?
it's a surprising thing here. So that doesn't look like it's got a lot in it, does it?
Oh wow! Okay.
It's surprisingly heavy,
Yeah, surprisingly
without
heavy.
a comparison. That's lead white. It's full of metal, basically, not in a basic lead carbonate rather than just pure lead, but it's so yeah, some little surprises there as you go along.
And so that's the reason that it's then measured in volume rather than.
Yeah, because really you're buying pigment. That's all it is, and that's what artists always did. They would buy pigment. I don't know, maybe some of it was by weight and some of it was by volume. I suppose it depends what you're buying. But then once you've made it into paint, it's really the volume that matters more than anything else.
Interrupted then.
That's all right. So yeah, things I need to figure out next. I'm going to go back to that warm because I missed it in here. I don't know why. Okay, but all these are going to give a context, some marks that will hopefully lift the whole thing later on. I think that should be enough. Some of it I'm unsure about, so I'm going to put a bit of that green in here, get rid of that dark edge. There's a few spaces where the lights are going to go on top, so I don't really need to overwork them. And that's where the paint will start to get thicker. Oh yeah, so I was finding a few extra dark bits. So I've got this dark green I mixed, which is as dark as it gets. And I'm just playing with putting that in a few places. There's a few places where it's edges as well, so you can define some of those. This little corner here, that's going to be useful. So when the light goes over the top, it should make sense. Same thing there. Anything else with the, yeah, so a bit more of that in here. And don't want to go too far with it. A little bit there maybe.
There is quite a lot of forward planning that you do.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm figuring out. Well, a lot of it's dictated by the image itself. So the other thing is there's some warms and reflections in the shadows. So while I've got that colour on the brush, I can sort of chuck a bit into the shadows, knowing it will come through afterwards. And that will also allow me to define those edges later. And it's not really happening here. I could go take a little leap and go to my violet here. So complete change of colour. And that's not going to be dark enough. Should have gone darker. There we are. There's going to be some purples go into that later on, but not right now. I'm not going to think about it. The lights are really going to define these shapes. So actually I can be quite clumsy with the darks. No, that is higher up. Means it's going to be higher on that side as well, but I don't have to think about that yet either. I can do a similar thing with this. So I'm going to need to mix a shadow colour, which will be slightly purple, in order to give us that that contrast with the yellow lights. That's very purple. I'm going to put a bit of raw umber in it, which is effectively dark yellow, to make a more neutral version of that. And that's, I'm going to put that over here as my new black. It's not black, it's slightly purple, but it's near enough. If I take some of this blue here Yeah, a little bit more of that blue, because as it gets darker it will get bluer. And I add some of this to it to make a shadow. Should see the same kind of tonal jump that I can see in the image. I don't think I'm even going to change brush. I think I can just use this one, keep those scrubby marks. And let's put a few of these in. See what that does. There you are. You can get darker nearer the middle actually. They look the same, but they're not the same. Those shadows on the plate. This gets very dark under here. So now I've kind of got my full tonal range represented, so that's useful. Wakey. Yeah. Yeah, go back to my blue. That's some of the shadow on there. Then I'll make a slightly lighter version. Use a bit of that grey. It doesn't change too much. Pop that in the shadows there, that's more like it. So there'll be some of that in here. So it'll borrow a little bit of that blue. The lip of the plate is where the colour changes, so that's quite interesting. Again, none of that's all brown around here. Yeah, gets a bit redder and darker on the inside. So now this is individual brush mixes. This isn't the sort of thing I'm going to be doing twice. Also, I'm getting carried away because this isn't where I want my focus to be. I want it to be over here. So I can put a denser dark in that. I've done this. There we go. That's the edge I want under there. I also want it under here. Just going to follow that. Give me the edge of that. I'm going to go under here a bit, but I don't want to worry too much. Where else have I got a warm shadow? In here? Is that too much? In here maybe? Oh, as my head moves around, I'm starting to see more stalk. No, that's all off. Very dark. Cheekily borrowing a bit of green here. I don't know if it's sort of sagging as it goes, but it might be a bit. Bit of green. Where else do we need that? Maybe a bit in here. Cheeky. Okay. I think I'm nearly ready to start putting the lights on, which is going to come next.
Well, she probably makes it an extremely good point to have a break.
Yes, I think it does. So hopefully you're full of excitement to see the lights and the bright yellows go in.
Yeah.
And I've done all the preparation I need to do.
That's one of those dangling carrot things.
Yeah, yeah. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So we'll see you. Here's my new time lapse, and we'll see you after the break.
And we're back.
Back again. Hey, well, yeah, I know I have a lot of silent viewers, people who don't join in. Not everyone's as confident as Catherine and Josie to sort of stick their neck out. And but if you have any silly questions, I use up all of my mockery on Graham, so you're perfectly safe. But yeah, do get involved if you think I'm doing something horrendously wrong. I really appreciate people. What
are you doing?
Well, no, sometimes like Dawn's very good at that. She'll just say out loud, "This looks wrong to me," and mostly there's a reason for that, which is to do with the cameras or this, that, and the other. Or I've made a decision which later might turn out to, it could be a better decision. But it's just that thing of. I did a critique for an art group last week, which I may have mentioned, and it's just really good to sort of get to that place where you can have conversations about how different people see things, because we get so close to it ourselves, we just don't get that, and it shouldn't matter, and it's not like you should change your decisions, but. It's less of a horrible surprise if you know in advance that no one's going to like it. I think that's the real advantage for me.
Also, I think with art, it's for somebody to say, "Oh, that looks wrong." It's quite challenging to one say it, but two receive it as well.
Yeah,
You just spent hours just.
Well, the bizarre thing is, it's one of the tricky things about teaching is the voice I have in my head isn't one I can use on anybody else because it's really harsh.
Except when I start painting, I'm sure you'll unleash it.
The only reason you're the recipient of that kind of thing is because I know how I know it's not going to affect you personally. If you actually went home and cried yourself to sleep, I'd feel slightly bad momentarily. So, and I wouldn't want to have to go through that. So,
excuse me.
So yeah, no. In all seriousness, though, there is you're really harsh with yourself, and the moment anyone else says it, I know a few good artists that. Any criticism, they become really defensive and are kind of unaware in the sense that it's that's what's happening.
There is actually quite
the hardest thing to do
in listening to negative feedback.
Really, it's just and especially because the thing that most artists. I was saying this to a friend the other day that. Every artist has resilience because you've got to keep doing it anyway, because to begin with, you're going to be bad and you're going to keep being bad and people are going to tell you and they're going to be right and you've got to do it anyway. So you sort of develop this skill of completely ignoring what anybody else thinks. And then suddenly one day you're meant to have a way of processing that. And I just don't think that's reasonable. I don't think that's what happens. Okay, I've got a nice new crisp brush here, and I'm going to start going in with a few.
Is this like new crisp brush?
Yeah,
been used before?
Unused.
Wow.
So I'm going to get a nice, neat, clear edge on it.
Isn't it?
I'm not going to use any oil just yet. I'm going to start with the cooler colour because I can always move towards the warm. So this might not be enough, but I'm going to put in a bit of an edge here. See what it does. Straight away that looks pretty good to me, colour-wise, but it's a bit too early to tell. I'm trying not to go along the edge. I am thinking of edges, but I'm trying not to sort of do what I would do with a pencil line. which is travel along the edge. I'm trying to work away from the edge.
Why?
Because there's a direction to the structure of the petal, and I'm more interested in imitating that. So here it kind of, it's square there and then it comes out. So that sort of goes along the edge. Here it sort of comes in across here. So I'm putting the brush, which has got this nice sharp sort of corner to it. There you are. Yeah, and then again over here I can follow that line. I don't think I've got enough paint there. Where did I put my knife?
Is it underneath?
No. What did you do with it?
You were cleaning it just before you left, weren't you?
Sorry, I'm mucking about.
Is it that one?
I don't think so, but that will do.
You got another one there.
Yeah, okay. I have a glut of knives. Very well, point taken. Maybe it is that one and I put it back. Yeah, oh well. But I was saying before, I should still have the recipe for this, which was a little bit of the grey. That's all there was to it. A bit of the grey in there. There it is, more of that colour. Yeah, a bit more yellow. Fine tuning. Yeah, a bit more yellow than that. So I'm using the opacity of the cad yellow to do the job that normally a bit of white would do. Okay, so there's a greenness to these. There's a bit here. I want this paint to get quite thick. Really to sit up, and I don't want to keep fiddling with these marks. He says fiddling with the marks. Yeah, a few explodey bits of the trumpet there. Right, that's a line that goes down into it. As is that. Does that look artificial? What about here? So the blade of the brush, that flat edge, is what's creating the edge of the petal, which means that the paint's working into what's underneath as it goes. There it's very bright, as it is there. Here there's a few sort of broken bits. What about
Not
here?
put your gloves back on either.
I haven't, no. But I'm not mixing anymore.
That's such a schoolboy comeback, isn't it? But I'm not. I'm still using the paints, but I'm not doing that bit anymore.
Yeah, well, I know. I mean, when you're mixing is the main bit. I ought to have them all at the end because that's when I start prodding stuff. So yes, you're absolutely right. I'll put them on again in a minute. I was saying earlier how I'm giving such a good example by wearing them. Yeah, it doesn't know what it wants to be. I quite like how much it's mixing on the surface here, and it is giving me some sort of daffodily sort of texture. Daffodil-esque. I'm going to break that line there.
Don't go daffodil-esque. Daffodilly. I really liked that.
Okay, we'll stick with daffodilly then. I'm going to go over to the warmer ones now. I'm still not at the very bright ones, but that's warmer there. Where else is it warmer? There's a few warmer bits in the centre of this. What about here? Yeah, and in there. Let's pop a bit in there as well. Now I really need to be, yes, here, thinking about the lemons at the same time here, but they're a different kind of flavour, but that yellow will also work for this. And again, I'm still kind of blocking in a way here, so I'm going to keep doing that. Those bright yellows are going to come in later on. There's a few of these warmer ones which I quite like. So there's a bit of mixing on the surface. Oh. The same thing here, a few edges. Not super bright. Maybe a little bit there. Okay, I'm definitely fussing now. That's going to have a bit of that yellow in it. So all these bits here. Now the segments, when it comes to the segments of the lemon, the shapes are going to be really important. A lot of it, I know it's there, but you really can't see it. So I've got to kind of control myself. That's too bright. So I'll hold off on that for a second. I'm adding the yellow on the brush to this darker yellow over here, and I'm going to warm it up slightly. I'm going to put a few of these oranges in where I need them. So it's going to be one lighter there, and in here. Where else? Probably a little bit in there. Okay, I'm being fiddly now. Stop being fiddly. Okay, while I've got those warmer oranges, I can put a few in here. Not too much. A little bit on the underneath. Where else? No, that's cooler. A few bits in there. Right. A few of these edges here. There's more yellow at the edge. More yellow at the edge of this as well. The lights aren't in yet. I'm going to go over to the greener one now. Is that too green? Yes. Make it a bit redder. Let's see what that does. That's a pretty good colour. Still feels a bit green. Up to this, see what this does. Yeah. Be darker in the foreground. And a bit in there. Ooh. Tricky. This has got a similar kind of thing going on. Yeah, so some of these sort of shapes of colour and stuff. It's warmer around the edges here. That was all too light, wasn't it? Maybe a little bit under there. can pop a little bit of that in here as well. Bring that back out. Where else have I got some dark warms? I think that's already pretty much on point. Yeah. Yeah, a few deeper shadows here. Where else? No, other than that, I think we're okay. Right, gloves time. Put them back on. Ah, thank you very much. Okay, this is interesting. I've got this sort of halfway yellow here, which I can use to sort of break that edge. Give me some of the texture of that lemon. Yeah. I'm going to need some of the lights for the rind where it's cut through. For the daffodil, I've got some of these oranges, they work quite well. I'm going to go back to those. I'm going to pour a little bit of this one. Pop it in here. Warm it up a little bit. Let's see if we can put a few shapes in here. Now, there's been an interesting thing with painting flowers, which is there's a way I paint which people will have seen working for things like glass and most things really. It's observational. Hopefully it's got some sensitivity to it. It sort of helps me reveal something of what I'm looking at and engage in that words, you know, that sort of visual relationship we have with the world. Sometimes the flowers, as I discovered with the roses, really tricky. Now there are always sort of techniques, you know, and if you have a route around YouTube, you'll find some really good flower painters doing a really good job of it. But some of them will be using the same method every time. There'll be a way they paint flowers and it works and it produces lovely paintings and that's great and everything. But it won't necessarily be a great description of what they're really seeing or what they're... and I'm sure that's not the point either. Okay. I'm going to make a brighter version of this. Actually, it feels like that's too bright, but I think it'll be okay. So for me, what I'm really trying to get to is a way of describing what I see and still ending up with a picture of a coherent picture of a flower that's got some floweriness about it. The reason that rose failed so horribly is because it lost all the characteristics of a rose in being described. It lost its colour and its translucency and its sort of flowing quality. So at this point, I'm slowing down and saying, can I see the trumpetiness of this daffodil? there's no, that's too dark. There's other things which are more important than my normal order of operations. You know which colours and shapes and forms and things come first. Now here's where I work into that background a bit more, bring some of this out.
Here's a question for you then. So you mentioned that some painters on YouTube have a way of painting flowers, which is their way of painting flowers.
Well, painters generally, not just YouTube.
Well, yeah.
You can
YouTube, so I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
So, and you haven't, or maybe you have now, but you struggled with finding your way of painting.
That's the thing. What's important for me is finding my way of painting flowers, which I like and I'm happy with.
But is that not the same when you say they have their own way of painting flowers, etc., etc.? Is that not the same as you painting a glass of water?
That is a very good point. I think the point I'm trying to make is that there is a way I paint a glass of water which works for a glass of water and doesn't work for a flower. And what I want is to find my way of taking that approach and making it work for a flower, which sometimes it doesn't. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
So it's
you don't want to adapt to painting a particular way to get a result.
I could learn a few tricks that I would know work and that I do sort of show to people, because they can take those and they can use them as they would see fit. In fact, I'll bring one in. I did a little demo the other day. It was really just about mixing colours. And I did a sort of an example of how you could use it to describe a rose. So that is a rose painted with all the strong colour in the middle, and then into warm colours and lights on one side and cool colours on the other. And it does kind of describe something that looks like a rose. But if I were really looking at a rose, those marks, I could adapt those marks to be a bit like the rose I'm looking at. But I'd be losing that thing that I find interesting, which is investigating an object and discovering what it looks like. So at the moment I'm playing with looking how I want to paint this daffodil. It's not working. There's a few things I'm going to have to figure out with this. So I'm having the same thing that I had with the rose, where I'm looking at this and I'm saying, well, I've seen that and I've put that in, I've seen this and I've put this in, so why isn't it looking like I want it to look yet?
Okay.
And that to me is quite interesting. So part of it's the drawings out. The other thing is that I'm losing a little bit of this sort of frilliness. So I'm going to go back in, I'm going to take a bit of red, I'm going to take a smaller brush and I'm going to try something, which is just doing a few little squiggles like this. Just a few little sort of texture bits that go back that describe how this little trumpet thing creates these little forms, especially around here. Does that look more like a daffodil now? If I blur my eye, close one eye and blur my vision, I'm starting to see that daffodil. But when I focus again, I'm going, nope, that's not it. So I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to extend that down, a bit more green in there. I can go for a bit of a greater colour change in places. So a bit more of that in there, a bit more of this in here. That's sort of doing it. That's what I'm seeing. I should be happy with that. That's a nice little edge there. Oh, you know what? I need a bit more of that. I've lost my kitchen towel now.
No, it's just there on your left.
Oh yes. Oh, oh here we are. There's a few of these little shapes and bits and pieces. They're quite fun. I'm not getting enough distinction between my background, sorry, the petals and the trumpet. So I'm going to go in with an even darker brown sort of colour and try and pull that out. Now, because I've already got some paint on the surface, this should sort of mix in as I go. So hopefully I can sort of define that dark shape there and a bit of that here. And that was too much like painting a line. And then I can borrow a little bit of that with some of the frills. Is that too much? It's too dark now. Put a little bit of that under there. No, now it's too warm. It's interesting though, I'm starting to find out, this is where I struggle, and this is also where I find out about this daffodil and how it appears to me in all its daffodilness. Too dark. That's where the paint's going to start getting blurry as well. I tell you what I have found though. I found a better colour for the insides of the lemons. Yeah, it's not too far off. I think maybe it's the marks I'm making. I'm going to wash that. And I think I can go even more orange as well. So let's do that. That's really orange, and I'm going to put a little bit of white in it. No, that's way too much. More yellow, more red. There you are. And just let some of those colours just dance around a little bit, make some of these lights that sit up on the surface, especially at the edges. Okay, that's a bit more trumpety now, isn't it? Oh yeah, okay, that's loads better. And the last things, good job I put these gloves back on. I'm covered in cadmium yellow now. I'm going to get some of this lemony yellow.
It's like it almost needed a little bit more emphasis around the edge of the trumpet, didn't it?
Yeah. And take a bit of that white, make this lemony yellow. I can really sort of bring out some of those little bits. And up the top here, just where it's catching the light. Where else? Yeah, catches the light there a bit now. This is interesting, isn't it? Seeing how much yeah. I'll borrow a bit of the actual lemon yellow. And oh, I'm going to be in the way of the camera here, but can't be helped. There we are. And this is me painting the same way I paint if I'm painting glass. And it's delivering an object in the same way, which I'm quite happy with. Let's just put that little edge on that and go even lighter. Just to brighten that up here. Hey, ping. Don't want to overdo it. It needs a bit here as well. And that's probably enough. Okay, yes. No, doesn't need a bit more up there. Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty good. Right, let's do the same thing with the lemons. Yeah, okay. So here, it's going to be a lot yellower along that sort of top ridge, and it's going to reach the edge of the lemon here. And it's going to sort of subtly break apart into the rest. Sneaks down here across that. Yeah, we'll mix that in a little bit. Okay, that's already giving it a bit more form, isn't it? Go back to this green. It's a warmer green there. It's not really light, but just light enough to sort of create a few of these sort of lighter shapes, which I don't want to be super bright. I keep ignoring this one for some reason. That's more orange as well. What's that doing? There we go. That's much too light earlier. It's a bit cooler underneath. I'll pop in an extra bit of light there. A little reflecting colour. I'll have a little bit of it. Oh, that's too much. This will have quite a lot. That works. I think. Oh well, let's break that a bit. This will have a bottom edge. A bit under here where it catches the light. That will have a bottom edge there. Okay, so the next thing I'll do, I don't want to go all the way to white, but I'm not going to be far off it. So I'll get some of that. And it's got a bit of that grey sneaking in there, but that's okay, I'll use that. Let's see what that does. If I pop a bit in here. Is that too much? Now here I am going to have to sort of kind of do chunks. I'm trying to do the brightest bits first and then let it break apart as it sort of comes around. That's going to be finer. We'll do a bit like that here as well. And it's going to get thicker there. And here. And into the foreground as well.
So I think this question from Josie goes back to the painting style, and she said, so what were you not doing before? I mean, before painting it like you do glass.
Well, it's about priorities. So the thing is, there's certain things we're sensitive to and we'll look for when we're looking at a flower, which are things like its shape and its sort of intensity of colour, which is really telling us something about how much light is shining through it. And also there's other things which are less of a priority. So colour temperature makes a lot more difference to how we see it than sort of exact descriptions of the edges of petals and stuff like that. And so it's a bit like that thing of, you know, like a botanist would paint a flower in a particular way, and it would describe its qualities, and sort of it would be useful to identify another one should they come across it, you know, or someone who hadn't seen one before. But it's not necessarily what a painter's doing when they're trying to describe how it feels to be there with it. And I think that's the thing. It's, you know, I'm not trying to describe the crystalline structure of glass. I'm trying to describe how it feels to be around it, and the light bouncing around it, and how that tells you about your environment and all the rest of it. And I kind of want to paint flowers in the same way, but you've got to look for different things in order to do that. I feel like I'm not explaining myself very well. So the transparency and of the petals means that when the light travels through them, you get more colour turning up. I'm seeing some different things in this fruit now. Let's pop a little bit of that in there. Oh, that's an improvement.
We have about 15 minutes left, by the way.
Yeah, loads of time. Yeah, so the priorities for the flowers are different to the priorities for the glass in terms of what describes the flower. So that intensity of colour is going to tell you more about the translucency of the petals than really observing what those colours and tones are. A bit like when you know, with a landscape, if you take a picture of a sunset, you get that photo back and have a look at it, and it's not the same. It's not the same as standing in front of a sunset. It's because the photo can't do the same things to you that the setting sun did, and also you're not in the same place, and so yeah, lots of this stuff gets away.
She says, I was just trying to get what you were changing in your looking.
Yeah.
But I haven't asked it very clearly either.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, it's really about priorities. The orangeness of the trumpet compared to the greenness of the petals is what makes that look like a daffodil, more than an accurate description of the lights and darks. And so the colour can kind of come to life a bit more through doing it that way.
But is there an element as well, do you think, that, I'm painting a glass. A glass is a solid structure. We know exactly what one is. I mean, yes, we all know what a daffodil is as well, but daffodils are different every time that you get a daffodil. But you have the same glass. Yeah,
so where is its daffodilness?
Yeah.
What does that come from?
Daffodilly and daffodilness.
Yes. I mean, this is the thing about paintings. You do end up with a few nonsense words. They are. That's giving me an edge. Yeah. I often mention Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception in Heaven and Hell, and it's very interesting, the sort of the revelatory nature of how he was experiencing certain things, like being interested in the folds in his trousers and suddenly having this idea of why artists like drapery so much. And it never occurred to him before then, and why would it have done? You know, it's not the world he was in. And so, yeah, there's this sort of, what would you call it? Yeah, revelatory is the word. This sort of, this space where these different concerns become apparent. I shouldn't have done that, should I? Still, you know what? Dry brush. That edge is too hard. I need a few brighter yellows, and I'm just going to use pure yellow just to create myself an edge around there, just that it jumps out. Now, let's paint straight out the tube. Cheeky. No part of the lemons are going to require that. So other things, and I can do these really fast. I want some of that plate background colour. I'm going to start off with the white.
I also find it fascinating that the way, what you're painting is what you're seeing, and it's all dependent on, you know, how your eyesight is at the end of the day as well. Like, how are you picking it up, and us then actually looking at the object that you're painting, we might see it in a different way. And admittedly, like through this live stream as well, we're seeing an ever so slightly different angle as to what you're seeing. And so
a bit like rainbows.
Yeah.
Everyone gets their own, which I think is rather lovely and romantic. There we are.
Do you find it more difficult painting something like a plate, which is sort of one colour, very shiny?
Nothing's one colour, because you've got all the light playing on it as well. Oh, your stomach rumbling. Should have eaten something. I've already forgotten your question. Sorry, Graham.
That's right. You kind of answered it just by going, nothing is just one colour.
All right. Yeah, I mean, you start with a local colour. That's what I was going to say. So the plate's local colour is white, but it's acted upon by all sorts of other things, and all of those change it. It's good to understand the local colour. You know, if you're painting, someone's wearing a red jumper, it's useful to be able to mix the red that their jumper is. But almost none of their jumper will actually appear that colour, so that you could just take that paint and put it on and fill it in, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is where the logic of the plate is going to start becoming difficult. Okay, I'm going to get a bit of this grey, and I've got that. Oh, that's nice. I've got this. got this soft edge around here. That's quite fun. Anything else? That could be do for it. Oh yeah, I've also got this blue colour. I'm going to borrow a little bit of this yellow, pop it in the blue along with a big blob of white. I'm going to create a bit of movement across here. Oh, got escaping hair. How are we doing for time?
8 minutes.
Oh, right. Well, that's not bad for 2 paintings, is it? So I quite like that light travelling across here. I'm going to put a bit more, as I said beforehand, I would on that side. So there's a sense of more light sort of falling over where that goes. I'm definitely going to do it with the daffodils. So I am going to do the pot in a sec. The daffodils sort of pointing up here. So I've got this diagonal here. So I've got this sort of sympathy lines. So I can put one kind of across here a bit, and I can put one sort of across here, and then leave this sort of darker bit in between. And you won't actually see these, but once they're sort of mixed in, but they'll be suggested. But it does a job. It's nice, lots of nice vertical marks as well, so it's not really fighting with me. Let's get another clean brush. I'm going to want some of those shadow colours. I've got a whole load here. I've especially got this purple. Is that still too wet as a brush? I think it probably is. Yeah. Come on. So if I put some of that in here, maybe a bit further across, I can extend that a bit. Yeah, that's good. And then I can make it a bit more violet as it comes down here. And under there, I sort of missed with that mark. I'm going to have to come back to that. This colour can be this sort of creamy version. So again, I've got this grey. I'll pop a little bit of that into it. And I've got this sort of shape of this vase. It's not light enough. And it's going to be pinker. A little bit of yellow in there. And a lot more white. Maybe now. Ah, what was that? No, that was the shape I was going for. Got a bit of a shadow. You know what's happened is that the daffodils moved in its jar, I think. I'm not quite right. A little bit more of an edge there. This is where I could start getting fiddly if I'm not careful. Maybe a bit of fiddling won't do any harm. Okay. Sort of a light edge, keep it relaxed.
5 minutes.
It's not an exam, Graham. Relax.
Hmm?
So it's not an exam, relax. Oh, I quite like those rough marks like that. Great timing, camera, thank you. Okay, there's a direction to this. Sort of works like that. Bit of reflected light on the underneath. That's probably enough for that. Oh, except for the bright highlights, obviously, which will get a bit yellower too. And going to be here. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of that edge. Where's that green? Ugh. Really bluey green that I'm going to want. That'll do it. Going to come from here. Nice. Nowhere else I can sneak that, I don't think. Probably going to put a bit in there. I'm going to put a bit in there. Naughty. Right. It's going to be my blue again. Oh yeah, with this purpley colour. Let's drag that down. Right, I'll stop fiddling with that, that's fine. Where else? A bit of purpliness under there. Yeah, that helps. A little bit in here. Okay, I'm going to be fiddling with this now. Put that in there. A little bit into the middle of the shadow. Give it a bit of realism. And I think that's probably time, isn't it? What have I forgotten? Anything?
Your signature.
Oh, no, one more thing. Let's pop a few little bits of specular highlights, using a deliberately soft brush just to pop those on. Rough brush, I should say. Yeah, that's quite fun. Let's put some of that light at the front. Yeah, I think that'll probably do it. I'll just be fiddling otherwise, won't I? What else could I fiddle with? not entirely comfortable with the shape of this lemon. There's a little bit of light at the back there, and then a much darker version. Somewhere around here.
Josie said, "Great evening, lovely paintings. Thank you very much."
Oh, well, thank you for coming, Josie. Always a pleasure to have you along, and yeah, really appreciate the joining in and the being involved and asking a pertinent question here and there. Keep me on my toes. Okay. I'm definitely over fiddling with it now, aren't I? I'll do it. Tiny brush signature. I'm just painting my phone by accident. Was there a tiny brush? There was a tiny brush. A tiny brush. I guess I'll go with a sort of that dark yellowy colour to sign it. See if that shows up. No, it doesn't. A light yellowy colour then. Same with this one. That was a bit of fun. I'm going to take my glove. Let's take this one off. Have a little shout out to the team first of all, and it's important. I don't say this enough, but I really couldn't do any of this without the help of my beloved cat, who keeps an eye on things, knows what's going on. There's Graham. So today's painting. There's my lemons. It's rough. It's a bit clumsy. I'm not 100% happy with it. That probably won't be going out anywhere. But it might help the next painting, which will actually be decent. The daffodil, by contrast, I'm quite pleased with. This little trumpet, and that's as I was seeing it. So you can see, it's got some similarities in terms of its objective appearance. I quite like it with its little vase. But yeah, I think I will do some more things like this. I feel I'm emboldened now to sort of sit down and do some stuff properly. And with the same palette, which I thought was the interesting thing. It's the same palette for both paintings, and you can absolutely see that, especially with the background colours and what have you. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. As you're probably aware, YouTube has algorithms and all those sorts of things, so meant to ask you to subscribe and like and all that kind of thing, but I don't care. In fact, unless you're 100% sure, I recommend you just don't take the risk. If you're watching on Facebook, that's a horrible poisonous platform. You want to get off it and you want to watch on YouTube. There's lots of good stuff. And if you watch mine, it was just something better immediately afterwards, and you can go, oh, I should have watched that instead, and then you'll know what to do next time. So I hope that's a
a glowing endorsement.
Glowing endorsement of the value of a sort of a kind of a TV platform authored by the populace, and so support that kind of thing. And thank you so much for being here and coming along, and thank you to Graham for his assistance. And I hope that's been fun, and we'll see you next week for something